Hello there. Welcome into a Wednesday edition of the show. I am so glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the new and improved Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way and a veritable cornucopia of prizes. Want a couple of last minute switchbacks, Memphis tickets? I got your hookup. Want some tickets to Ludacris on Saturday at the Colorado State Fair? I got you. You want to go to Air Force's opening game on Saturday against Merrimack? Got you for that too. The number for interacting and winning. Text, call 719-247-1313. Apparently, I'm going up against Sean Payton right now. A little bit of a late press conference from the Broncos head coach talking about the roster cutdowns. I'll bring you some of that audio throughout the course of the program. And I want to start with football. And I can't say that I'm totally surprised. But I also know how this is going to end regarding the Pittsburgh Steelers and the decision they made at quarterback today. I'm not surprised that they said Russell Wilson is going to be the starter for week 1. Because that was the plan all along. That doesn't mean that should have been the plan, that they made the right decision. I'm just saying I'm not surprised they're going this route. And this is not really even about Justin Fields and what I believe he is. It's what I believe Russell Wilson is not. Because I saw it for 2 years, and people in Seattle saw it for the 2 years prior to that. The only way, no matter how much you do or do not believe in Justin Fields, you have to acknowledge that the only way that there is any upside, any potential for the Steelers quarterback room to be better than it was a year ago is through Justin Fields. But they set out, and the initial plan was we're going to start Russell Wilson. So you're just delaying the inevitable. The inevitable is you're going to go with Justin Fields. Look at the back half of their schedule. You saw Russell Wilson for the last 2 years just like I did. Look at the back half of the Steelers' schedule and tell me that Russell Wilson survives that. That you would want to go into that part of the schedule with Russell Wilson as your quarterback. I understand why they brought him in. Right? You got nothing from Kenny Pickett. You weren't in play for one of these rookie quarterbacks. It took a flyer. Right? That's all this was. But then they got Justin Fields, who actually could have something more to give. So the plan all along, they start Russ, and when he inevitably falters, they go to Justin Fields. Because the only chance, and I'm not saying that Steelers fans should feel heartened by this or eternally optimistic about this. I'm just telling you the only chance they have to be able to survive a late season schedule, which includes basically a run through the entire AFC North, a sprinkling of the Philadelphia Eagles, is if they can get something out of Justin Fields. And my argument is, why not start now. What did Russell Wilson show to separate himself? I understand the plan was you get Russell Wilson, then you get the guy with a little bit more upside, but you know he's got some bad habits from when he was coached by Luke Getsy in Chicago. You want to coach some of that stuff out of him. You want Arthur Smith to do that. And then you have a more, I hate to even say this about Russell Wilson because I don't think by many people's standards he's polished, but a more polished quarterback to just get you into the season. But then the preseason happened. And you put these two quarterbacks head to head, and there's no argument that Russell Wilson was better than Justin Fields. Zero. So if he can't even go out in the preseason and show that at least right at this given moment, he's better than Justin Fields, then why start him? And I got to believe it has a lot to do with the fact that once you bench Russell Wilson, there is no going back. And I could make a similar argument when it comes to Justin Fields, but I'm talking about like career over. There's no going back. Once the Steelers decide that Russell Wilson isn't their guy, then Russell Wilson's NFL career comes to an end. The idea of Justin Fields being a starting quarterback in the NFL certainly goes away if they were to start with him and then bench him. But Justin Fields is young. Justin Fields is athletic. You could do worse than Justin Fields as your backup quarterback. I think the finality to it weighs heavily into this decision. And I got to imagine that was part of the agreement when they brought Russell Wilson in. But the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks have both shown that it's more important to make the right decision for your football team. Starting Russell Wilson feels like a favor to Russell Wilson. It doesn't feel like what gives the Steelers the best chance to win. The Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos, especially the Denver Broncos, said, we don't care what the repercussions are. We don't care if this means that Russell Wilson is never going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL again. Sean Payton did not care. He acted in the best interest of the Denver Broncos. And in the best interest of the Denver Broncos, think about this, the gravity of this statement. The best thing for the Broncos was to outright cut Russell Wilson and incur the biggest dead cap hit in the history of the National Football League. That was in the team's best interest to basically take a sledgehammer to their finances for this year and a little bit next year. But Sean Payton knew that it's what is best. And how could you argue with the results? If he worried about Russell Wilson and his feelings and his legacy, Bo Nix wouldn't be a Denver Bronco. So I think the Steelers are making a mistake. I think it is inevitable that they are going to turn to Justin Fields. And you'll just look back at the first however many weeks and say, what was the point? Like, where is the point in this season that Russell Wilson gets you to where you don't go, why couldn't Justin Fields have started? What week is it? Week 4, week 8, week 10, week 12? What's the week where the Steelers bench Russell Wilson and go to Justin Fields, where you go, well, it was worth giving it a shot? There is no point. If they're just going to bench Russell Wilson at some point, then every week leading up to that week is going to be viewed as a waste of time. I understand the Steelers' plan and what their vision was, but you have to be able to take in new information and be able to adjust accordingly. Russell Wilson was not better than Justin Fields. And that's what you were banking on. Right now, Russell Wilson's better than Justin Fields. I watched the preseason. No, he's not. No, he's not. And what you have is the finished product of Russell Wilson. You don't have that with Justin Fields. Isn't that worth? Let's be real about what the Steelers are this year. Okay, if the Cleveland Browns can figure out the quarterbacking situation, whether it's Deshaun Watson or Jameis Winston, if they can figure it out even a little bit, the Pittsburgh Steelers are absolutely the 4th place team in that division. Where are you setting your sights? With Russell Wilson as the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, they might be already the worst team in that division. Their only hope is that they get whatever Justin Fields has locked deep inside and bring that out. This is not necessarily pro Justin Fields. This is about Russell Wilson. Because you could swap out Justin Fields for a lot of different quarterbacks, and I'd be saying the same exact thing. This is about Russell Wilson and where he is. A team with a pretty savvy head coach, pretty smart, little egomaniacal, may not have the best bedside manner, but pretty sharp, says, I would rather eat $60 or $70 million. I would burn it like the Joker in The Dark Knight. I would rather light $60 or $70 million on fire than have Russell Wilson as my starting quarterback. Than even to have him in the building. It's powerful enough of a statement, and the Broncos should have known. We should have seen it coming. We should have trusted the Seattle Seahawks. But, as fans, I don't think a lot of Broncos fans are inclined to take the word of Seattle Seahawks fans. Richard Sherman was screaming it, and nobody wanted to listen. And Seattle duped George Payton into paying a king's ransom for Russell Wilson, who they deemed a year prior was washed. If that alone isn't enough, Sean Payton makes the decision that he makes. Said, I would rather make Russell Wilson one of the more well-compensated quarterbacks in the league to not play for us than to go one more week having to deal with what Russell Wilson is at this juncture in his career. And that's the other thing. Yes, Russell Wilson, back in the day, there was a time where Russell Wilson was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. That time is over. This is not reimagining what Russell Wilson was. This is acknowledging what he is now. It happens to everyone. Look at Peyton Manning in Super Bowl 50. Father time comes for all of us except Tom Brady, who might be a vampire. That may actually be the TB12 method. I'm not entirely sure. We didn't see that drop off from Tom Brady. Good on him. We've seen it with a lot of different quarterbacks. Russell Wilson is human. And he's hanging on to an NFL career that probably should be over. Or he should accept being a backup quarterback. The problem is he won't. He won't. And because of what he once was, it's very difficult, as the Broncos found out, to bench him. Sean Payton did anyway, but it's kind of hard to do because he's such a known name. He's such he comes with so much, and he has the famous wife and everything like that. It's tough to have him on the bench. But here's the other part out of it. Said my piece with the Pittsburgh Steelers. If they don't want to help themselves, I'm not going to help them. But this is good news to you if you're a Broncos fan. You get what you want. You get week 2, Pittsburgh versus Denver, Russell Wilson versus Bo Nix. Probably more accurately, Russell Wilson versus Sean Payton. You get that. You're the big winner here. Pittsburgh Steelers are not. But you're a winner because you get maybe the most anticipated game on the schedule. And you get it for the reason why you're anticipating it. If it was Justin Fields, if the Steelers made the right decision today, week 2 would not be nearly as fun. So if you're a Broncos fan, and hey, I'm in the content business, it is better for me that Russell Wilson comes into Empower Field in week 2. But those Bronco fans and Ryan Kaufman are not stakeholders in the success of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's who Mike Tomlin should have kept in mind when he was making this decision. Benefits Russell Wilson, benefits Broncos fans, benefits people who want to talk about the storyline of Russell Wilson going back to Denver. It does not benefit the Pittsburgh Steelers. 719-247-1313. Do you think the Steelers are making the right call with starting Russell Wilson? And if you're a Bronco fan, how amped are you that you will get Russell Wilson in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform week 2? 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll stick with quarterbacks because the annual QB tiers survey came out from The Athletic, and there are a couple of players that I think are being a little bit underrated. And another survey season, says there is one quarterback that is the most overrated in the NFL. You may be surprised to hear who they say. It's next on Extra Sports 1300. Tonight, the Colorado Springs Switchbacks take on Memphis 901 FC. It is Witches and Wizards night at Widener Field. Dress accordingly if you so choose. Then after, the Switchbacks take on Memphis. Fireworks, as you might expect. First fans through the gates at 6 will get a goblet, which goes with any outfit. Still some tickets available, switchbacksfc.com. And I still have tickets. I have 2. I have a pair of last-minute tickets to the match tonight against Memphis. If you would like to go, be the 13th texter to text Switchbacks in your name to 719-247-1313, and I will get those to you toot sweet, and you can go on to the match this evening, and I may see you there. Speaking of the text line, couple of texts in here. Steve G says, having Wilson on the bench would be a big distraction. He'd be acting like a spoiled child, and you don't need that. I feel like moping is the right word. Like he's still engaged in, when he was benched for Jared Stidham, he's still knowing that the cameras were on him. He still looked like a supportive teammate, but just the look he had on his face. And look, to be fair to Russell Wilson, like if I went to multiple Super Bowls, if I won one, if there was a time within the last 5 years where I was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, yeah, I'd have a tough time hiding my emotions too. I would. So I don't totally, but I don't think, I think his unwillingness to be a backup quarterback is going to mean that his career may come to an end in the relatively near future. But it would be hard. And it's kind of like, the comparison, because there's a big discussion about this, Cam Newton a couple of years ago. That's kind of a guy that Cleveland might find this out with Deshaun Watson. Right? There's just some guys that it looks really weird having them as a backup. You kind of got to be all in on them. And if you're not, that becomes the story. Justin Fields on the bench is not as big of a story as Russell Wilson on the bench. And I understand that, but what's more important? Trying to win football games or awkwardness on the sideline or questions at practice? Brett comes in. Where's Josie Jewell missing tackles this season? That would be Carolina. Carolina outbid the Denver Broncos for Josie Jewell's services. So plan your Sunday viewing accordingly. Although Josie Jewell, everyone's talking about Russell Wilson coming back to Denver. What about Josie Jewell? Nobody's talking about Josie Jewell coming back to Denver. I get it. Chronological order, right? The Russell Wilson game is first. Josie Jewell is much later in the season. But Josie Jewell, he'll be coming back to Denver. Mike Sando of The Athletic puts out this quarterback tier list, and I do enjoy it. And I enjoy when it's well-sourced. This is not, there's a time and a place for people to say, here are my tiers, and I'm going to do that. But it's nice when somebody takes the pulse of players or coaches or general managers or scouts and says, here's what they think. I always enjoy reading stuff like this. But I can disagree. And looking at his tier list, I do disagree. In tier 1, which is described as a quarterback that can carry his team each week, the team wins because of him. They have Mahomes, Burrow, and Allen. I think most people would agree, although something on the Buffalo quarterback that I will share with you shortly. But I would agree. But I look at that tier and I'm saying they're missing one. The guy that's at the top of tier 2, Lamar Jackson. And this is what happened last year all over again. I forget who it was. Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham, one of these wide receivers. Somebody did their top 5 list and put Jalen Hurts over Lamar Jackson. And I vehemently disagreed with it. And remind me again how the season went. Lamar Jackson is, if you want to make Patrick Mahomes in a tier all by himself, I wouldn't blame you. I wouldn't blame you. But I don't feel the need to do that. I understand where Patrick Mahomes is. I would like the most elite quarterbacks to be bunched together, and that's Mahomes, that's Burrow, that's Allen, and that's Lamar Jackson. Because all of a sudden, if you put Lamar Jackson in tier 2, which is described as a quarterback that can carry his team sometimes, but not as consistently. I'm sorry, what has Lamar Jackson been doing? Except when he's been hurt. Is that what this is about? Because when he's on the field, he's dynamite. He's winning games for the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know where the idea that Lamar Jackson somehow, and I'll just take it with Josh Allen. How is Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen not in the same conversation? Yeah, they both lost to Patrick Mahomes a lot and may never beat him. Put Patrick Mahomes in a tier all by himself. But Lamar Jackson's problem is a problem that Josh Allen also has, and a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL have. Lamar Jackson should not be in a tier that also includes Dak Prescott, CJ Stroud, who, played awesome last year, no doubt about it. But this dude has been doing it for a year, and he's in the same tier as Lamar Jackson. Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff. These are the quarterbacks that Lamar Jackson should be compared to. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. Lamar Jackson is a tier 1 quarterback. And I seriously question those who think that Lamar Jackson should be in the conversation with Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, who are far more dependent on the people around them, right? That's the delineation. Tier 1, you win games because of them. Ravens don't win games because of Lamar Jackson. Remind me again the elite wide receivers that he has played with over the years. Remind me again what that group has looked like. Jalen Hurts needs help. Brock Purdy needs help. Jared Goff needs help. Lamar Jackson can carry the Ravens just as good as Josh Allen can carry the Buffalo Bills. So I think that that's the biggest gripe I would have with this. The other one I would have is kind of a twofer. Tier 3, they say, is a quarterback that's a legitimate starter but needs a heavier run game and or defensive component to win. Okay, kind of like the group of quarterbacks I mentioned, Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy. That sounds like them, but yet they're in tier 2. And then you have quarterbacks like Tua and Trevor Lawrence that are in tier 3. They should be in the same tier. Put them in, either put Tua and Trevor Lawrence in tier 2 or put Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts in tier 3. And I would lean the former. I think this is underrating Tua and Trevor Lawrence because that tier includes Kyler Murray, Geno Smith, Russell Wilson. Tua and Trevor Lawrence shouldn't be it. Deshaun Watson, Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield. Tua and Trevor Lawrence deserve better than that. So elevate them. I'm not saying drop Brock Purdy or Jalen Hurts. Elevate Tua and Trevor Lawrence. And then, based on what I just got done saying in the first segment, why is Russell Wilson in any category other than should not be a starter in the NFL anymore? Tier 4, a quarterback could be unproven or a veteran who ideally would not start all 17 games. Who's Russell Wilson fit more in with? Tua and Trevor Lawrence or Daniel Jones and Gardner Minshew? It just makes the inclusion of Tua and Trevor Lawrence. And in fact, honestly, at this stage in the game, I think it's a little unfair to Baker Mayfield. Russell Wilson should be in tier 4. So elevate Lamar Jackson, elevate Tua and Trevor Lawrence, drop Russell Wilson, and you got a pretty good tier list. The problem is they have too few tiers. I have 5 tiers. 6 if you elevate Mahomes into his own. That's the issue. Need more tiers. Need more delineation between some of these quarterbacks. I get Russell Wilson is the worst of tier 3, but he's in tier 3 with Tua and Trevor Lawrence and Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. That's insulting to them. Good reading. If you want to check it out, if you have an athletic subscription, I do very much enjoy it. I'm just saying there were a few misses. And then there's another survey that went out where NFL players named the most overrated quarterback in the NFL. I was shocked to hear who they voted. See if you're shocked. Coming up next on Extra Sports 1300. Let's keep the giveaways rolling, shall we? Air Force football kicks off their 2024 season this Saturday afternoon against Merrimack. Be there to experience it and experience all the new that is at Falcon Stadium. If you'd like to go, I have a 4-pack of tickets. All you need to do is be the 13th texter to text Falcons and your name to 719-247-1313, and you get 4 tickets to see Air Force take on Merrimack this Saturday afternoon. And speaking of winners, shouts to Jason, who picked up the last pair of Switchbacks tickets. I will get those to you shortly. Jason, hang tight. The outlet known as ESPN did a survey, asked a bunch of questions of NFL players, and quite honestly, I don't know what the other questions were because I couldn't get past their answer to one question in particular. And that was, who's the most overrated quarterback in the league? Their answer shocked me. Their answer was Josh Allen. I just got done talking about how if you're making an elite quarterback tier, there are 4 guys that deserve to be on there. It is Mahomes, it is Burrow, it is Lamar, and it is Josh Allen. It is absolutely Josh Allen. It's absolutely Josh Allen. Sorry, does he decide how kickoffs are handled? Was that his decision? You have to show me where Josh Allen is overrated. And you can't. I'll save you the trouble. You can't because he's not. Nobody is making the case that Josh Allen is better than Patrick Mahomes. That was a debate a couple of years ago. That is no longer a debate. So what is said about Josh Allen that would lead him to being overrated? I would be genuinely curious to know. Because if there is anyone in that elite tier of quarterback in the NFL that you could even start to make the argument is overrated, wouldn't it be Joe Burrow? Yeah, I know he went up against Patrick Mahomes and lived to see another day, unlike Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. But he did that once. One time. Tell me what else Joe Burrow has accomplished in his NFL career other than that one time he beat Patrick Mahomes. Now, I'm not making the argument that Joe Burrow is overrated. I don't think he's overrated. But if there's anyone of that group that could be considered overrated, if you really wanted to spit out a flaming hot take, it would be Joe Burrow. And a lot of it's not his fault, right? He's been hurt. But isn't that what it is? Right? We anoint you because of something, but yet we don't have another thing to bring up. In the NFL, it's about wins. It's about winning Super Bowls. Joe Burrow didn't win a Super Bowl. Matt Stafford did. Maybe Matt Stafford should be in the top tier over Joe Burrow. But that's not the argument I want to make because I think Joe Burrow is one of the elite quarterbacks in the National Football League. But to say that Josh Allen is overrated is completely preposterous. Buffalo would be nowhere without him. Could you imagine Sean McDermott coaching a football team that didn't have Josh Allen? He would have been unemployed 2 years ago. It is only by the grace of Josh Allen that Sean McDermott still has a job in Buffalo. If you have to answer the question, I think if I had to pick the most overrated quarterback in the NFL, it might be Russell Wilson given today's news, but probably more accurately, I mean, how about Justin Herbert? I mean, if you have to answer the question, couldn't you say that Justin Herbert might be the most overrated? And I know whenever you say that, it's an incendiary remark, but really try to take some of the emotion out of it. Justin Herbert is constantly looped in with the elite quarterbacks. Now, in the tier list, he's not. And in my tier list, he's a notch below these other guys. But if you expanded the list or you rank top 10 or just the way they're talked about, Justin Herbert is one of those. But yet there is zero accomplishment behind it. How could you say that Josh Allen is overrated when you compare him to Justin Herbert? Now, I think as a talent, Justin Herbert is elite. I do think he's an elite talent, but there's a reason why I leave him out of my top tier. He hasn't won anything. And yes, I know Brandon Staley is to blame, but until we see it, we're projecting this stuff on Justin Herbert and putting all the blame on Brandon Staley. I fully expect Justin Herbert to accomplish much more the rest of his NFL career with Jim Harbaugh as his head coach. But at this given moment in time, where the talk about how good they are doesn't really match up with the accomplishment, it would be Justin Herbert. Another quarterback that I think could be in this argument is Trevor Lawrence. Right? Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be God's gift to quarterbacking. And he took a step back last year. Injuries were a factor, absolutely. And I do expect Trevor Lawrence to bounce back this year. But these are snapshots in time, right? The answer may change year to year. At this given moment, if you're looking at production, if you're looking at accomplishment and reputation, Trevor Lawrence would be a better choice than Josh Allen. We could also go to the good old standbys. Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy. Nobody thinks that either one of them are overrated? Or perhaps because there's so much, I think with those two guys, it's because there's so much negativity that it balances it out. And we actually get a pretty good calibration of where Dak and Brock Purdy are. There's just so much vitriol that it's like, well, he's not that bad. He's not that. So that's probably what saved Dak Prescott and Brock Purdy. But having Josh Allen as the most overrated quarterback in the NFL is, you know, there's a reason why We don't. I brought this up before with the NFL top 100 list, which, by the way, Patrick Mahomes was not ranked number one in. That was polled. That was the players being polled. And that drew a lot of people's ire. And I made the comparison to hockey. There is an MVP in hockey called the Ted Lindsay Award. Nathan McKinnon won it this year. But it is given to a player by players. And when you hear that, you think, wow, we should really, hold that up a little bit more, right? Who knows these players and how good they are and how valuable they are better than the players? So shouldn't we be? Now, Nathan McKinnon won both, and Connor McDavid has won both in multiple years. So we really haven't too often had the discrepancy between the two. But in a year where the traditional MVP trophy, the Hart Trophy, voted on by the media, voted on by a chosen set of voters, is different than what the players. Shouldn't we go with the players? But we don't. And why? Maybe it's because every time the players are pulled on any players, they come out with things like this. Right? The tier list that I just went over with Mike Sando, like, I do think it's pretty ridiculous that Lamar Jackson is not in the same tier as Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. But he's at the top of the next tier. And it's like, okay, I think you got that wrong, but you're only essentially elevating him one slot, right, in the pecking order. What the players seem to do on a regular basis is take somebody that is so far out of a particular conversation and just bring them in. Like when they included Jalen Hurts as one of the 4 best quarterbacks in the league last year. That's ridiculous. That came from a player. It's like, why don't we hold up what the players say? Why don't we hold up the Ted Lindsay Award as what these players should be striving for instead of the Hart Trophy? Because sometimes in all sports, it's not just a football program. In all sports, the players come up with some wild takes. And saying Josh Allen is the most overrated quarterback in the NFL is a wild, wild take. Don't you agree? 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Sean Payton speaks on the toughest cut for Broncos fans, but if you listen to him, maybe also for him as well. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Wednesday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Keep this number handy, 719-247-1313, because one, it's the best way to communicate with me on this show, but two, it will be your number to potentially win tickets to Ludacris and Air Force versus Merrimack on Saturday. Going to be giving those away later on this hour. A reminder that you can watch the show on a daily basis if you follow us on social media at XTRA Sports 1300, at Extra Sports 1300, Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube. Shows all there. Roster cut down day is over. Today was practice squad day, and a lot of the players that maybe you went, that were cut, ended up on the practice squad. Michael Burton is on the practice squad for the Denver Broncos. Lil Jordan Humphrey is Michael Bandy, somebody I thought had an outside shot of making the 53-man roster. He is on the practice squad. So there's some guys that maybe were in the conversation of getting a roster spot that are on the practice squad, and we could see them at various points during the season. Right? And Sean Payton talked about it earlier this afternoon, or at least hinted at it. You know, some of this is protecting, right? Who can we protect? Who can't we protect? They can protect Michael Burton, Lil Jordan Humphrey, as long as they are willing to be on the practice squad. Brandon Johnson, meanwhile, looked for a change of scenery. He's now in Pittsburgh. Yes, I asked myself the same question, why? But that's where he chose to go. So the practice squad being the extension of the roster. Some of these guys that you thought you were never going to hear from again when it comes to playing for the Denver Broncos, I wouldn't be so sure. Now, there are some where that door is closed, Brandon Johnson being one of them, Samaje Perine being another. He is now a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. Did chills just go down your spine to think that Broncos are going to have to go up against Samaje Perine twice this season? It shouldn't. It really shouldn't, but losing Samaje Perine, you would be much happier, I'm sure, if he would have ended up in Carolina or the Giants or something like that. But he's a Kansas City Chief, and Tim Patrick is a Detroit Lion. And of course, when it comes to cut downs, the player that Sean Payton was asked most about was Tim Patrick. Here's Sean Payton on making that cut.
Against Green Bay, you know, he makes some plays. I've watched his progress, obviously his journey off of really 2 seasons and the makeup and all the things that we look for. And, you know, we visited for, you know, a few minutes. I say I'm happy because I know Dan Campbell that well, and I think the world of Tim. And all of you that have covered him longer than I've coached him understand all the things he brings to the table, aside from just being on the field. So that was difficult.
You had a couple receivers you weren't able to get on the practice.
So that was Sean Payton talking about cutting Tim Patrick. And look, the primary reason why Tim Patrick is no longer a Denver Bronco is because of the younger players. A veteran wide receiver gets in the way of the development of a Devon Vele or a Troy Franklin. Takes away looks from a Marvin Mims. That's why he's no longer on the team. I think first and foremost. Secondarily, I go back to something that Sean Payton said. It was just last week. And Nick Kosmider of The Athletic had a long piece today about the roster cutdowns and how Sean Payton continues to turn over this roster. And as I pointed to yesterday, about 68% of the roster is different from what it was in Nathaniel Hackett's first game. And in terms of starters, about well over 70% of the starters from the season opener against Seattle 2 years ago are no longer on the Denver Broncos. So it's significant turnover. Not unheard of, not historic, but significant. And there was a line that Nick put in his Athletic piece that Sean Payton said that I think kind of illustrates it. He said, these guys have a chance to just write their chapter in a pretty good book. They really can't pay attention to the prior 6 chapters. When Sean Payton goes through this terraforming of the Denver Broncos to his liking, part of his consideration is getting the stench of the last 6 years out of the building. Now, Tim Patrick is hardly to blame for what has happened. And heck, he's been hurt for the last 2 years. Not saying Tim Patrick is to blame. But in Sean Payton's mind, I think you have to be quite exceptional and also fit his timeline in order to stick around. And you look, and Javonte Williams is in a contract year. Garrett Bowles is in a contract year. Cortland Sutton's future is a little bit up in the air. And I would not be surprised if it certainly one, maybe 2 of those 3 guys are not Denver Broncos next year. Part of this is getting rid of that losing stench. And that's, again, it's not Tim Patrick's fault, but he was a part of it. And this is about a fresh start. This is about a new direction. This is about Sean Payton impressing his beliefs and his way of going about things on impressionable young players. Right? There are some bad habits. There are some old habits, old ways of thinking that are harder to coach out of a guy who's more established in the league. That's also part of this. But before Broncos fans want to go doom and gloom here, can we take a moment to remember that they have Josh Reynolds? Like, Josh Reynolds was one of the only noteworthy free agent acquisitions that the Denver Broncos made this offseason. And I think it's because they brought in Zach Wilson and with the rookies, he kind of got buried a little bit. Like, they brought in Josh Reynolds for a reason. And you're essentially swapping, and I said this yesterday when the reports came out that Tim Patrick was going to Detroit. Yes, part of this, and maybe the primary reason, is because of Troy Franklin and Devon Vele. But let's also not forget that they just acquired Josh Reynolds. And when you look at Josh Reynolds' numbers, not only can you envision in Sean Payton's offense Josh Reynolds outperforming what Tim Patrick would, you could look at what Josh Reynolds has done the last couple of years in Detroit and compare it favorably to Cortland Sutton. Right? You extrapolate it out, give Josh Reynolds an elevated spot on the roster. We know he was behind a couple of good receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown, can't forget different position group, but Sam Laporta was targeted more by Jared Goff. You elevate him and you put him in Sean Payton's offense. Josh Reynolds could be just as productive for the Denver Broncos as Cortland Sutton has been the vast majority of his time in Denver, and certainly more productive than Tim Patrick has been. Would you like it better being wanting things immediately, wanting immediate gratification? You want the Denver Broncos to be as good as they possibly can be right now? Would you rather have Tim Patrick on this roster than not? Absolutely, and I understand that. But Sean Payton is looking at a bigger picture. And it's not like it's Cortland Sutton and all the kids. I say kids just to exaggerate my point here. 2 rookies and a second-year wide receiver. It's not Cortland Sutton and those guys. It's Cortland Sutton, Josh Reynolds, and those guys. And in a lot of the discourse that I've seen, there just hasn't been enough mentioning like, hey, Josh Reynolds is here. He was productive for the Lions. I won't say he's a forgotten man, but there hasn't been a lot of conversation about Josh Reynolds in this training camp and in preseason. And he's been more reliable, more productive than Tim Patrick has been. But yes, the Broncos are a smidge worse by letting Tim Patrick go. But that's the bet that Sean Payton is making. The benefits of this, getting the young players time to develop, getting them reps and touches so they can hit the ground running. It's the same with Bo Nix, right? Get all these reps in. Maybe he's great. Maybe he's bad. Maybe he's mediocre this season, but he'll be ready to roll year 2. Whatever he's going to be, he'll be that in year 2. That's what this is about. And it's about Sean Payton remaking this organization in his image. And the more players from previous regimes that remain, the less he can do that. But there are exceptions. Quinn Meinerz is an exception. He is so good at his position that Sean Payton's like, you know what? That's good. Justin Simmons, as good as he was, gone. Age, injury history. I think the guys that Sean Payton inherited do have quite a bit of an uphill climb. And that's what should be credit to Quinn Meinerz and some of these other players who have stuck around. Sean Payton didn't get Tim Patrick at all last year. And he has some of that stench of losing on him. And that's also what Sean Payton's trying to get out of the building. But you can tell with his comments that that was not an easy decision. But I see the pros outweighing the cons, given what I know Sean Payton is trying to do with the Denver Broncos. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Shador Sanders making history when it comes to his latest NIL deal. Tell you about next. 4-time platinum rapper Ludacris will be in our neck of the woods this Saturday night, along with Mike Jones as a special guest. If you would like to go to the show, I have a pair of tickets for you. If you are the 13th texter to text Ludacris or Luda. You knew Luda. Maybe you guys are on that level where you call him Luda. Luda, Ludacris, and your name to 719-247-1313. The 13th texter will get a pair of tickets to Saturday night show at the Colorado State Fair. And make sure you check out more of the concert lineup and all the things to do. The Colorado State Fair by logging on to, you guessed it, coloradostatefair.com. By the way, speaking of winners, congrats to Mark, who's the winner of our Air Force tickets. I'll give away another 4-pack coming up here shortly, next 10 or 15 minutes. But Mark nabbed 4 tickets. This is quite significant in the world of name, image, and likeness. Shedeur Sanders has become the athlete to sign the first NIL deal with Nike. That's big. Right? These watch companies, blenders, all this other stuff, getting a residual from EA Sports for the college football game. That's all well and good. But the first NIL deal that Nike, which by the way, and just as a preview of things to come, longtime sports journalist Armin Katayan is going to join me on Friday. He wrote a book about the new era of college football, NIL, transfer portal, all this kind of stuff. It's called The Price. It's available now if you'd like to go ahead and start reading it before Armin joins me on Friday. But it's kind of interesting because NIL and the fight for NIL obviously traces back to Sonny Vaccaro when he was at Nike. So NIL exists all these years later, really because of Sonny Vaccaro's efforts. And we know the Ed O'Bannon case that he was a part of. So it's just interesting that Nike, somebody at Nike, was one of the first people to kind of fight for what NIL is supposed to be. Always have to put that caveat in there. What it's supposed to be, not pay for play. Like, you have a company, you have a product, you have an event because of who I am. You can compensate me to help move merchandise, to sell tickets. That's what NIL is supposed to be. That's what Sonny Vaccaro was fighting for. And now, all these years later, the first NIL deal for Nike is signed by Shedeur Sanders. Surely that would not grow Shedeur's confidence going into tomorrow night's game against North Dakota State and moving forward. Because if there's anything I have come to learn about Shedeur Sanders, is that that apple fell far from the tree. He is nothing like Deion. It's not like he, has invented his own touchdown celebration that is in the new college football game. It's not like he's come across as brash and he's never said that every team on our schedule thinks we're their Super Bowl. He's never said anything like that. So I would say him signing this deal will not at all cause Shedeur Sanders to be boisterous or anything like that. Because it's just not him. I can't see it. I have no indications that Shedeur has any bravado. That is a joke. I should have the hi-hat or whatever, too. It's not my best. I know. So it's one more thing for Shedeur. And look, this has to do with marketing. The value that Shedeur Sanders brings Nike is that there are college-age men and women. There are young boys and girls that are fans of Shedeur. And Shedeur apparently has a shoe that he can now wear because CU is a Nike school. So he'll be able to show off his cleats while having this NIL deal with Nike. But this is about marketing. This isn't about accomplishment. And if you're Nike and you're like, you know what? We're going to sign one of these quarterbacks to an NIL deal. They going to go to Carson Beck? They even going to go to Quinn Ewers? And sometimes people conflate this. Like, the closest thing to this, I think back to when Sports Illustrated named Deion Sanders their Sportsman of the Year. It wasn't about accomplishment. It was about the attention garnered. The fact that Deion Sanders was all anyone in the college football world and the sports world could talk about. And that's what Sports Illustrated was highlighting by making him Sportsman of the Year. This is not an MVP race. This is not a Coach of the Year race. Yeah, Ohtani did more on a baseball field than Deion Sanders did on a football field, but that's not what it was about. Should it have been about accomplishment? Maybe you could make that argument, but you understand why Sports Illustrated did it. If nothing else, it benefits them, right? I don't even know how one goes about getting a subscription to Sports Illustrated. Do they even do the magazine? I don't know. Do I get the football telephone? I have no idea. And that's kind of why they put Deion Sanders on the cover, because people maybe didn't realize Sports Illustrated still existed. Believe it's an online version now. Saving trees and all that. But it's the same thing here with Shedeur. This is about marketing. This is about moving product. And if you're going to pick one player in college football to hitch your wagon to help you move merchandise like some of these other Nike athletes do, it's Shedeur. It's Shedeur more than Travis Hunter. Right? Travis Hunter may be more talented, but Shedeur's the quarterback. Shedeur talks a little bit more, has a little bit more of that swagger. Not to say that Travis Hunter doesn't, but he has more of it. And by the way, this is a longer-term investment, so it's NIL now, but soon Shedeur will be a full-blown Nike athlete when he does go into the NFL next season. And that's a bet that Nike is making. And it's a bet that if I were Nike, I would make it too. Right now, everything is so focused on Deion because of everything that's happened, right? The attention is on him, as it should be, by the way. But once the season begins, tomorrow night, when the season kicks off, that ratio will balance out a little bit because it did last year. It was almost Deion and Shedeur. It wasn't Deion, Shedeur, and Shiloh, and that's where Deion kept having to interject Shiloh's name into the conversation. But it will start to balance out a little bit more, and Shedeur will be about as high profile, probably the highest profile player in college football. And I'm very interested to see what he does now that he's not this, new sensation. Right. And and Shedeur, what Shedeur does this year is kind of an extension of CU, right? And Deion Sanders talked about it the other day. It's changing hope into expectation. Right? This isn't new anymore. And just the story, just their existence, them being in college football is no longer good enough. That's how quickly we move. You could argue by the end of the season, the last few weeks, that wasn't enough. I don't know how well Deion Sanders has handled this transition over the last few weeks, and I'm curious to see how Shedeur does. I don't think there's any reason why Shedeur Sanders can't be in the Heisman conversation much of this year. Because I think CU needs to get out to a start like they did last year. Right? It would be a disaster if they stumbled out of the gate. They got beat tomorrow night by North Dakota State, or they end up losing to CSU or Nebraska. That'd be a disaster. Don't have to win all of them, but need to be sitting pretty. 2 of those 3 look good doing it, probably, if you're not going to win all 3. But if Shedeur gets out to a strong start, yes, some people will say, well, wait till he gets into conference play, and that's probably fair. But he will be interjected in the Heisman conversation. And I don't think there's any reason, even if the Colorado Buffaloes don't win the Big 12, I don't think there's any reason why Shedeur Sanders can't put up numbers with this revamped offensive line. Why he can't put up numbers to be in the Heisman conversation with perhaps the inevitable counter argument of CU isn't winning or isn't winning to the level that Texas is or Georgia is. Tomorrow night, Buffaloes and Bison. Did you see that somebody had the unmitigated gall to point out that Ralphie is actually a Bison? Because, and I may be speaking out of turn here, Buffaloes don't exist anymore. Am I correct on that? They're all Bison. That's what we have. Now we have water buffalo and stuff and other, but here it's Bison. Ralphie is a Bison, yes? His family, her family, are Bison. They're not buffaloes, they're Bison. I know why this story is coming out, but I pity that poor woman who said, Ralphie, it's Bison. Because North Dakota State's the Bison. Buffaloes and Bison. Maybe whoever wins tomorrow night, that's what Ralphie is. Can we put that on the line? That if North Dakota State beats Colorado tomorrow night, Ralphie will have to henceforth be referred to as a Bison and not a Buffalo. I'm just trying to generate excitement. There's nothing else CU related to talk about. 719-247-1313. Take a break. Here's your weather and traffic.